You boys be quiet down there!
Welcome back to PC-88 Paradise, the series where we take a close look at classic games for the NEC PC-88, the most popular Japanese PC series of the 1980s. About a year ago, I made a video on the first Asteka game for PC-88. It was a simple graphic adventure game from Falcom that came out in early 1985. Today we'll take a look at the sequel, which came out in late 1986, Asteka II, Taiyo no Shinden, which means Temple of the Sun. On the cover you also get the Spanish title, Templo del Sol. However, many NES players know this game by a completely different name, Tombs and Treasure. But for now, let's take a look at the original version of the game. The case design uses the same layout as Xanadu and Ys 1. This seems to be the design Falcom usually used from roughly late 1985 to 1987. Inside we have a warranty and survey card. The manual is actually in full color. The foreword in the manual explains the legends of the Mayan ruins we're going to be investigating, as well as the ultimate goal of the game, finding the Temple of the Sun, and the key of the sun contained within. In the second half of the manual, we have the Ruins Guide, starting with a map of major Mayan ruin sites. That's right, just like in the original Asteka, we'll be exploring Mayan ruins in this game, not Aztec. And whereas the first game took place in Palenque, this game will take us to the more famous site of Chichen Itza. There are a few subtle hints to the game contained here in the descriptions of each individual building, but it can be pretty hard to tell what information is actually important to the game. Finally, the game itself is contained on two 320 kilobyte floppy disks, and wow, I really like the label and jacket design on these. It's very orange. Well, it looks great to me. To start the game, we simply insert Disk A in Drive 1 and Disk B in Drive 2. So first we get this nice title screen that has scrolling and music. I can already tell this is going to be a lot more advanced than the first one. The first didn't even have sound. The soundtrack of Asteka II was composed by Takahito Abe, the other composer on the Romancia and Xanadu Scenario 2 soundtracks besides Yuzo Koshiro. The game was programmed by Masaya Hashimoto, and the main planning and design was by our old friend and mastermind of the Asteka series, Tsuneyuki Miyamoto.
The game is based on actual ruins, so it's possible to enjoy it like a sightseeing tour. And if the player then becomes interested in visiting the actual Yucatan Peninsula, I would be the most pleased.
Start the game and we're dropped right into the overhead view of the Chichen Itza ruins. If you're familiar with the NES game, you've probably already noticed a lot that's missing here. We'll get to the NES version later, but for now all you need to know is that if you grew up with Tombs and Treasure on the NES, then congratulations, you got the far superior version of the game. So first of all, let's hit Q on the keyboard to open the save menu, and format a user disk. We'll be asked to insert a blank disk in Drive 1 and press space. About a minute later we have our user disk, which we'll need to switch with disk A every time we save or load, and the game allows for up to 9 game saves. Walking around the map, you'll notice flashing squares that appear when you get close to some of the buildings, meaning they can be entered if you press the right trigger button. Do so and the Adventure window appears on top of the current map. On the Adventure window, rather than the text input used in the first game, we select a number of icon-based commands. Look, take, place, use, move, push, break, pull, wash, wait, go, and combine items. Wow, that's a lot. The control is made somewhat easier thanks to the fact that with the exception of opening the save menu, the game can be played entirely with the joypad. The control still takes a bit of getting used to, since unlike most games, the left trigger button is enter, while the right trigger toggles between the icons menu, location selection screen, and items. Weird, but it makes sense once you get used to it.
Adventure games become frustrating when you know what it is you have to do, and yet the computer doesn't understand your words and you can't progress in the game. I hate it when that happens, so I thought I would try and fix it. Icon-based menus have one problem though. If you simply try selecting icons at random without even thinking, you can sometimes solve the puzzles. That won't work in this game though, of course. We still have a lot of issues to work out.
Playing the game blind for a while, I was able to figure out practically nothing, before inevitably getting lost in the wilderness. Cause for some reason the original PC versions of this game have an overhead map consisting of 225 screens, where only 6 of them actually have anything relevant to the game on them. I guess this is supposed to represent a vast jungle around the ruins, but this is definitely putting a lot of faith in the player that they won't become overwhelmed or bored. Once I got lost, I found it practically impossible to get back to the game area again. Without some sort of map from a guidebook or magazine, the player would have had to spend time drawing out their own in order to explore the entire game and find all the necessary locations. And look, there are even a couple of locations up here that you'll need to venture away from the main game area in order to find. This is just cruel. Alright, I've had enough. Let's take out a walkthrough. First, we need to grab this chest ornament at the nunnery that shows the current phase of the moon, which will be important for solving certain puzzles in the game. Then at the High Priest's temple, we can push the wall and find a secret passageway. Enter it, and there's a coffin with a mosaic tile we need to take, and inside a skeleton wearing a one-eyed mask, which we'll also grab. Then inside the famous Kukulkan pyramid, apologies for my pronunciations of some of these by the way, we find a bump in the wall where we can place the mosaic tile and open up a large treasure room. Wow, we've already hit the jackpot. Thanks, walkthrough. There's a ton of stuff in here we need to pick up, and even a couple of items which need to be broken in order to reveal important items inside. By the way, apparently in this game, it's really easy to soft lock your adventure and make the game no longer beatable. There are tons of things you need to move and break, and about the only action that's 100% safe is the look command. It would have taken lots of play sessions saving and loading, as well as starting over from the beginning before anyone managed to actually figure out this game on their own. At the Temple of Warriors, we need to grab a silver orb and a blue jewel from the statue of a jaguar, but attempting to take the jewel will cause the statue to turn into a real jaguar. No choice but to leave and come back later. If you're familiar with the NES game, you've probably noticed some of the puzzles in this one are the same or similar, but the order in which you need to do things is quite different. Next, I get to show you the weirdest part of the game, and probably the biggest omission from the NES and Famicom version. We need to venture up to this small forest clearing on this screen with the pond, far away from the main locations of the game. Without a walkthrough, I didn't even realize this is a location you can enter. Here we find some temple ruins with a stone altar. What you're supposed to do is place some incense in a censer, which the protagonist automatically lights, causing it to give off Mayan crazy smoke.
Yuck! You made a magic smell!
The moment you do this, the BGM changes. This BGM was used for a different part in the NES game. While this trippy music is playing, we can go back to the ruins and look at these walls, which before had no markings of interest on them. Whoa, you mean the Mayans had magic paint that could only be seen while under the influence of a particular Mayan drug? Sure, that makes sense. By the way, some of these wall locations would probably be hard to find without a walkthrough map. How am I even supposed to know this little rectangle is a location you can enter, while there are other more significant looking objects in the map that you can't? Anyway, the pictures on the wall and the written descriptions you get of each one give hints for what you need to do in various scenes to finish the game. Once you view all 4 wall paintings, the incense automatically wears off and the music goes back to normal. I guess it's no wonder this part was removed for the home console version, and that includes Japan too, since they're very strict about illegal drugs in Japan, even ones that are now being gradually legalized in the US. Next we'll go to the Southern Spring, where we can wash some of the dirty items we picked up earlier. And until now I thought that the protagonist just always carried water around in order to wash items. No wonder the wash command never did anything. Stuff like this is not nearly as self-explanatory as the game seems to think it is. The manual doesn't even bother to explain it. Anyway, washing a scroll we picked up earlier reveals that it's actually a worthless map of the game. And washing the golden mirror reveals a broken flute in the spring, which we can grab and repair by combining it with a band-aid that you have in your inventory from the beginning of the game. The game actually uses the brand name Band-Aid, by the way. Just like in the US, it's often used as a generic term for adhesive bandages in Japan. Anyway, we can go to the observatory, El Caracol, and place the silver sphere on the pedestal and play the flute. This creates a ray of sunlight out the window. We can then go to this spot outside the Temple of Warriors. Kind of hard to realize there's an area you can enter here, isn't it? But it's supposed to be the group of 1,000 columns. Then we can see the ray of light from earlier shining on a specific column. Break the ground below it and there's a golden sphere. Later in the game, we'll use this sphere the same way we used the silver sphere earlier to reveal a different column and item. And even later on, the same golden sphere along with a golden stand will reveal yet another item. This game has a lot of repetition in it, doesn't it? Another part of interest is where we'll need to place a red jewel in the one-eyed mask, and then wear the mask to reveal a blue block. Taking it not only reveals a secret passage, but the blue block itself is an essential item for later. Next, remember that statue that turned into a jaguar? Well, the jaguar is only here during the new moon. We can use that chest ornament we picked up at the beginning of the game to see the current phase of the moon. Come here when the jaguar is gone, and we can use a stick to grab this key from a hole in a wall behind where the jaguar statue was standing. Then come back when the jaguar is here, and play the golden flute to turn it permanently back into a statue, and take the jewel from its head for real. This is one of those parts where you'd better be sure to get that key from behind the statue first, before turning it permanently back into a statue, or you're going to have to load your game or start again from the beginning. There's also this gear puzzle inside the Great Ball Court, where solving it will drain the Spring of Sacrifice, which is the spring way up here away from the ruins. Go down into the spring and we'll find a new area with a silver key, as well as a tunnel that connects back to the Great Ball Court in the main area of the game. I wasn't really planning on doing a spoiler warning for this video, but I guess I'll put one here, just in case. The silver key can be used on that coffin with the skeleton we found earlier in the High Priest's temple, revealing a hidden stairway beneath, with a glass sarcophagus containing a perfectly preserved dead human body. It looks like it's sleeping. We take the two-eyed mask it's wearing. We can place 2 jewels in the eyes of the mask and use it at a certain point in the Great Ball Court to see a white block. Taking it ultimately leads us to the Temple of the Sun, which turns out to be tiny. We have some medicine contained in a large pot we found earlier. Taking it during a half moon will shrink the protagonist so that we can then enter the temple. Inside we find the Key of the Sun, the objective of the game. But how to get it? Apparently this was the trickiest part of the game for many players, and the most frequently asked question. There was even a tip line you could call displayed in some computer magazines, where a recording of Tsuneyuki Miyamoto's voice would give hints on how to pass certain parts of the game, including this part as advertised here. Here's the solution. First use the key we got from behind the jaguar statue. This will unlock the temple, causing it to rumble and shake. Then go back outside the temple and use the medicine in the small pot to grow back to regular size again. Then moving the shrine will reveal the key again, which now you can take. Going back outside the ruins to the main map ends the game, and boy is the ending different from the NES game. All the explanation we get is this screen. The Key of the Sun was found to be made of an unknown material, giving off a radiant energy never before seen on Earth. The design and symbols on the key link it to the lost civilization of Atlantis, and currently the key is being kept as a top government secret, while the world's best minds are working quickly to uncover its mysteries. But the main part of the ending is the staff roll. So many classic Falcom names here. Masayuki Kato was of course the president of Falcom at the time, and graphics were done by Takahiro Oura and Tomoo Yamane. I remember fighting his name in Xanadu Scenario 2. And of course, Tsuneyuki Miyamoto is credited for map design and plot program. Plots was the name they gave to their system for laying out the areas of the game. The main programmer, as I mentioned earlier, was Masaya Hashimoto.
We often fought over whether his program was bad or it was my data that was bad. Most of the time, it was my fault though.
One quick trick for the game. Boot Disc B to hear a hidden tune. Then from there, you can type the password Miho to reveal a girl, who at first just says insert disk A and reset to start the game, but pressing space causes her to blink her eyes and give a few secret messages, including asking you to buy Romancia in Xanadu Scenario 2. The first ports of Asteka II were of course for other Japanese PCs. It doesn't matter a lot whether you play the original on the PC-88 or the Sharp X1, PC-98, or Fujitsu FM7. It's practically the same game aside from the music, due to the X1 and FM7's different sound hardware. It's also a bit annoying that the music gets constantly interrupted by the disk axis in these two versions. The MSX2 version was released a whole year later, and was the first version to really shake things up. Rather than Falcom themselves, this one was ported by a company called Zap, and published by Tokyo Shoseki, on a cartridge with battery backup. This is the first version that wisely reduced the size of the world map. It only has 36 screens instead of 225. However, the game is said to be even more difficult, due to some modified and added puzzles. This one also has a completely different ending, which would serve roughly as the basis for the Famicom/NES ending. Another year later, in 1988, we finally get to the Famicom version. Like the MSX2 version, it was released by Tokyo Shoseki, but this one was programmed by Compile. Thus, the game sounds a lot like Guardian Legend and other Compile NES games. There are a few subtle differences between even this Famicom version and the English NES version, Tombs and Treasure, such as your starting point at the beginning of the game, but it's mostly the same. The English version of the game was released much later, in 1991. Interestingly, it was released under the brand name Infocom, the company behind the Zork series, but this was actually after Activision had bought the brand in 1986 and shuttered it in 1989. Activision then continued to use the Infocom name mostly for ports and re-releases of other games, including Asteka II. Hey, you can still see the original title on the Tombs and Treasure title screen if you look carefully. The Famicom and NES version has tons of major changes, including a much more elaborate story where you take control of a male and female protagonist, who you can name, as well as their guide. You can switch between the three characters in order to use their individual abilities, and they talk to one another, often giving the player much needed guidance on what needs to be done next. The game has an added battle system where you can use an attack command to deal damage to enemies, which appear in certain predetermined areas. This gives it a bit of an RPG feel, but the main purpose of the battles is to keep you out of areas you're not supposed to be in yet, using an experience system where you level up gradually as you solve the puzzles. The map, again, has been made smaller and much easier to navigate than the original version, this time with 64 screens. Progress is saved using a password system, and the game has a lot of new music, in addition to some of the tunes from the original game. There are too many differences to list, but overall I'd say it's a much better game than the original Asteka II, in almost every possible way. But Tombs and Treasure wouldn't be the last version of Asteka II. There's a version on Falcom Classics 2 for the Sega Saturn. This version has scrolling on the overhead map, and you can even run. A handy exit command was also added to quickly get out of the ruins. There's pre-rendered animation when using the items, and there are game overs added, in order to help prevent some of the soft locks where you can no longer clear the game. But if you do manage to find yourself in that position anyway, the game will let you know by displaying the words deadlock on the load screen. The next year, a Windows version was released by a company called Unbalance as part of their Memorial Games series, along with Romancia and Xanadu. This version includes both original and arrange modes. Original is not actually an emulated version, but does use the original graphics from the PC-88 game. The arrange mode includes an opening sequence, a point-and-click mouse interface, a map with only 36 screens, and a built-in guidebook with some hints to progress the game. But now that we've gotten through the ports, let's talk about something even more interesting. You may remember this quote I used in the first Asteka video.
Maybe Asteka will even become an RPG in the future.
Immediately after that, I said that Asteka never became an RPG, but in fact it kind of did. Well, an action RPG anyway. Asteka became Ys. Okay, not really, but sort of. This is according to a blog post by the director of Ys Book 1 and 2 for the TurboGrafx, who was privy to this information from the Falcom staff at the time. After Masaya Hashimoto finished programming work for Asteka II, he wanted to see if he could make something similar to the game's overhead gameplay, but with 4-directional scrolling on the PC-88. With some work, he was able to create a prototype, where the player went around on a 4-directional scrolling playfield, grabbing chickens and selling them. Hashimoto wanted to use this as the basis for a full game, but apparently he and then Falcom president Masayuki Kato didn't see eye to eye, and Kato would only greenlight the project if it was another Asteka game, Asteka III. Hashimoto agreed, but quietly began developing Ys as a fantasy-themed game instead. And of course, as the project got further along, Kato eventually had to agree to release it as a fantasy game rather than Asteka III, and the rest is history. I think we can all agree Falcom is probably much better off thanks to that decision. Otherwise, I guess instead of Ys 10 Nordics, we could have gotten Asteka 12 Nordics. Though I seriously doubt a series called Asteka could have gone through so many theming changes without dropping the name. And wouldn't it be weird if Ys was in the same series as this? Interestingly, you can actually find a few references to Asteka II in Ys. First and most obviously, the item the Mask of Eyes in Ys was inspired by the one-eyed and two-eyed masks in Asteka II, which perform a similar function in both games, allowing you to see things you normally wouldn't be able to. Secondly, while in later versions of Ys 1, returning Lair's harmonica prompts her to play part of the Ys title screen titled Fina, in the 80s PC versions and Sega Master System version, instead she plays the title screen music from Asteka II. And third is maybe the most interesting. There's an item you can find in a pond in Ys 1, which in the Japanese versions anyway, is called a golden stand. This item isn't required to finish the game, and is only good for selling for gold. This is actually supposed to be a joke, a reference to the item of the same name in Asteka II. If you try to wash the golden mirror in the southern spring and grab the flute when you also have the golden stand in your inventory, the protagonist will accidentally drop the stand in the spring. So the idea is that Adol is picking up the item which the protagonist accidentally dropped in Asteka II. In my personal opinion, these are probably just fun callbacks to a previous game that was made by many of the same people, rather than actual leftovers from the very brief period when Ys 1 was supposed to be Asteka III, but it's fascinating either way. While Asteka 1 was a flawed but charming example of adventure games from the early 80s, Asteka 2 was a huge evolution of the genre. As for what Tsuneyuki Miyamoto thought of the state of adventure games at the time, we have this quote.
Some players seem to be wary of stories they aren't familiar with. Many adventure games these days are relying on manga characters to provide a sense of familiarity to potential players. I don't think it's a good trend. Original stories are what will prolong the life of the genre. The games may sell well for a time, but if it doesn't continue for the long term, it will be a loss for the software industry.
Though I personally have enjoyed some adventure games based on existing anime and manga properties, I can definitely agree that games based on existing licenses probably aren't enough to carry an entire genre. As for Tombs and Treasure on the NES, while my brothers and I rented tons of NES games back in the day, this was one we never played. I guess the game didn't look very interesting to us, and possibly the mid-1991 release in the US was just a little too late. There was certainly some tough competition on the NES by that point, and we were already looking forward to the release of the Super NES in the US. I'm kind of glad we never rented it, since honestly I don't think we would have liked it, or have been able to figure out much of the game. Even today, I have to admit, Asteka II isn't really my cup of tea. It was kind of fun playing through with a walkthrough, and I can see how it must have felt amazing when you managed to figure out some of these difficult puzzles on your own. I'm just not really into cryptic games where it's really difficult to figure out what you need to do, and I'm probably not alone. There's a reason, I think, why games like Ys are considered timeless classics. Even the original PC-88 version of Ys 1, I think, still holds up surprisingly well. Asteka II / Tombs and Treasure, on the other hand, has been mostly forgotten. But if it looks like fun to you, then why not give it a try? At the very least, it's another interesting part of Falcom's history. Thanks for watching this episode of PC-88 Paradise. I want to give a huge shout out to FTB once again for reading the quotes from Tsuneyuki Miyamoto in this video. FTB makes thoroughly researched documentaries that give a behind-the-scenes look at the Japanese PC market of the 80s and 90s. I can't believe all the new things I learn every time he releases a new video. And a special thanks, as always, goes to my generous supporters on Patreon and YouTube. And thank you as well for watching the video. Please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be back with another video soon.